Thank you so much for listening to Our People, Our Story. This is a Sioux Falls Connected podcast. Super excited to have Claude Hone joining us once again. If you haven't had a chance to listen to the other program with Claude, before you listen to this one, I encourage you to listen to that first, and that'll just really help kind of get the full picture. But today we're going to talk a lot about his military career. And again, joining me also we have Garrett Gross. Garrett, thank you again for being here, sir.
You bet. This is I'm a big history buff in World War II history. I've always enjoyed reading about it and learning about it. And over the course of my life, you end up meeting people that have stories and made contributions in World War II. And I remember in high school, there was a guy that came to our school, and he came and spoke about his experience in the South Pacific. This was in the early 90s when I was in high school, and I just remember being riveted to listen to Mr. Timmons speak. And I just put in perspective what these World War II veterans went through. And you're a high school kid sitting there thinking, man, I've got life pretty good. And now fast forward 20, 25 years, it's kind of fun to meet people that have had similar experiences. And I value my friendship with Claude and what he's been through when he was in the Marine Corps and in World War II. And there's another image that I'll remember probably the rest of my life is that we talked about the Washington Pavilion. There's that part of the high school where it's called Alumni Hall. And in that back hallway, they have all these old trophies where we talked about Claude's 1938 golf team trophy. State championship golf team is in the trophy case there. But on the other side of that hallway, there's a memorial that all the Washington High School students that died in World War II, their name is on that wall. And Claude showed that to me. And I think there's students there from class of like 1936 to the class of 1944, somewhere around that range. I might be off by a year. And to me, it was just a powerful experience having Claude point at some of those names on there and saying, hey, I knew that guy or I knew that guy's brother. And Claude, can you speak to that, just a little bit about that memorial at Washington High?
Yes. Back in I graduated in 1938. You see, when I started in Washington in 1934, there was just one building down there. It's now those big glass. It's on the north side of the complex there. It was the library, I think. And then they built another one over on 12th Street. And then eventually they built around it, and it ended up with all one together. But it was about over 4 years. It was separate buildings. And so then when I go back now, I remember parts of it where I used to remember the teachers and where I used to sit, and here they have this memorial for all the veterans that got killed. And in there, I recognize a lot of those names, and some of them are my friends. And people said to me that I'm a hero. I'm no hero. The heroes are up on that wall. They all died. That's the real heroes.
It's amazing to me, just the number. I mean, it's either 95 or 98 names of Sioux Falls kids. It's kind of striking.
From that school alone,
if you get a chance to check it out, I mean, it just kind of puts in perspective, because some of the family names are family names that are still in the community today.
Yes.
So let's talk about what led you to joining the military. And I was told there's a bit of a story that takes us up to Minneapolis even.
Oh yeah. First of all, in 1938, I graduated from high school. There was no money, no jobs, and the Army said, we'll give you training at Fort Snelling. You get up here, and we'll give you a uniform, and we'll give you 1 month's training and give you $21. Oh, that's great. So I hitchhiked up there with a I didn't even own a suitcase. I just had a box full of stuff, and they gave us a uniform, and at the end of 30 days they gave me $21 and took the uniform back, and so I now have an Army serial number. I served in the Army. Okay, so in Pearl Harbor, before Pearl Harbor, in 1941, Hitler he'd gone through Belgium, the Netherlands, and he was going to France. A bunch of us guys got together and said, I think, we had menial jobs. I think I was working at Morell's as a stock boy, making $25 a week. Anyhow, said, let's join the Army. So we went down to the post office, which is still standing there today, at the old granite building on 11th and Phillips. Was that 12th and Phillips? Yeah. Anyhow, upstairs they had the Marine Corps recruiting station. So 6 of us went up to join the Army. It happened to be about 12:15. You get over there, the door was locked. He'd gone to lunch. Across the way at the Marine Corps recruiting, he said, "What are you boys here for?" I said, "To join the Army." He said, "Why don't you join the Marines?" Same thing. Said, okay, so we all joined the Marine Corps.
And that's the story how Claude became a Marine.
That's how I became a Marine, thank gosh, because this Marines have a certain comradeship that operates nowhere else. Anyhow, so we joined the Marines, and I was an enlisted man in November when Pearl Harbor hit. When Pearl Harbor hit, December 7th, 1941. I joined the Marine Corps on the Marine Corps birthday,
Nice.
November 10th. And, of course, I've celebrated that many, many times here in Sioux Falls. They have a Marine Corps birthday ball, and I always come to it.
Nice. But there was something that happened shortly after that, wasn't there?
Oh, yes. Then Pearl Harbor hit, and since I was from South Dakota, had gone through boot camp, I was a crack shot because I was used to hunting pheasants and a rifle, and had firearms all my life, you know. And so people that came in, all of a sudden, they were indulged with thousands and thousands of people. They said, and I happened to be the number one crack shot of our platoon, so he said, "You're in charge of these guys. You're a drill instructor."
Oh, wow.
So I was marching these young people coming in and showing them discipline, because that's what boot camp is, teaching you no matter what, you don't question an order. When you get an order, you obey it.
Yeah.
So where were you at when you heard the Pearl Harbor happened? Were you at boot camp at the time?
I was at boot camp at the time. Pearl Harbor came, and I was at San Diego boot camp, and we all had our own rifles. They issued us ammunition and sent us out on the beach of San Diego down there, and every 10 foot we dug a foxhole, and we laid the foxhole with our single-shot rifle pointing out to the ocean. We figured, they're coming. You know, they came to Pearl Harbor. They're coming here. They're going to invade us. And so we laid there for about a week until they finally brought us back in. We laid in that foxhole, and they'd bring us some K rations or something. So we laid in that sand there. We were going to stop them. So anyhow, I think of that many times too.
I've never heard that story before. That's an but the fear was there. I'm sure there was more than that.
Well, a Japanese submarine did lob some shells into the Long Beach oil fields and hit some of the. So the fear was there.
Absolutely.
So you served as a drill instructor for a number of months.
All of a sudden, these people come, "Here, you're a drill instructor," and they put a corporal stripes on my no pay or anything, just to give you some authority. We call it a jawbone corporal. So anyhow, I was, and so about 6 weeks of that, I'd come to the sergeant and said, and here I was. You're living with them 24 hours a day. You put them to bed at night. You get them up in the morning, you know. And so I said, "I didn't join the Marine Corps to be a drill instructor. Get me out of here. I want to go to war with my buddies. Get me out of here." He said, "Well, what did you do in civilian life?" I said, "I was a file clerk at Morrell's." "You could file?"
Oh, no.
"Oh, yeah. Come." And the sergeant said, "Come in here." And here's his desk piled high with letters and everything else. So make some sense out of this. So I spent days and days. And so pretty soon, all the mail that came in, I delivered one to the captain, one to the colonel, and one to the sergeant. And I delivered it all every day. And I read the mail to see what one letter would say. "Oh, you have under your command my dear friend's son, so-and-so. Will you please treat him right? Make sure he gets..." Well, we treated him right, all right, when we gave us that. So anyhow, one letter came through and it says, "We need pilots desperately down at Guadalcanal. Anybody in your command you can recommend?" So I took the letter to the colonel and said, "How about recommending me?"
Yeah.
He said, "Write your own letter and I'll sign it." He wrote the letter, I signed it, and I was off to flight school.
Nice.
So that would have been the spring of 1942? Is that about the right time?
The fall of 42, because
42.
I got my wings on August 4th, 1943. I graduated. Oh, by the way, they had to discharge me from the Marine Corps and enlist me in the Navy to take Navy training. So now here I had Army, Marine Corps, and Navy. Okay, so then I got through with the flight training, and they said, and then, by the way, they took all the little guys like me, because we'd fit in the cockpit. The bigger, taller guys at the flight training, they made them bomber pilots.
Okay.
So, because we'd fit in these cockpits.
So did you fly before you had the opportunity to be a pilot, or was that the first time you went up?
I'd never been in flight training before. In fact, the first flight, after they gave us pre-flight, we went to pre-flight training at east of San Francisco, some girls' school out there. I forget. I used to know the name of it. Anyhow, so I just said, "Well, I'm going to war. You can pick out. Do you want to do volleyball in the sand? Do you want to do running?" I decided if I'm going to defend myself, I better take up boxing. So I took up boxing, and my instructor was Jack Dempsey, the world champion of the world.
Nope.
He was my instructor.
He didn't go easy on you, did he?
No, and so anyhow, we had what's called smokers every Saturday. The cadets get up, and I remember. So I didn't know much about boxing, but whirling away, I knocked down this guy. And about a year later, I met him down in the islands at an officers' club, and he said, "You knocked me down in flight school." So I remember his name was Myers. So anyhow,
Well, I thought maybe it was Jack Dempsey.
no. Anyhow, they sent me to Corpus Christi, Texas, and we had open cockpit biplanes, double wing, open cockpit. I'd sit in front, instructor sitting back. So when I threw up, it all went right back and hit him in the face. So I learned quick. I was scheduled to go in the morning, my flight schedule. I didn't eat supper, and I didn't eat breakfast. So if I got the dry heaves, he wouldn't know it. I was determined to get through. So we went down to Corpus Christi, Texas, where they had a single plane. It's called, it's a two-place plane. You sit in front, the guy sit in the back, but it covered canopy, and the wheels came up, okay? So, and he had a single machine gun on the cowling, and it shot right through the propeller. It went bing, 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 bing. I also thought, holy smoke, hope the timing didn't get off. It shot right through the propeller, single shot. So we learned aerial gunnery, and we learned we would meet a plane coming that was towing a sock. It was a long, like a windsock, and they had wax colors. I would have a red, and somebody else would have a green. So if you hit the target, you could tell whether you've been hit or not. So later on. And to first, we'd see this target, and we'd go upside down and dive on him, and we'd get sucked way behind. So we hadn't started early enough. You see, so we learned to start diving here in order but to start with, we thought, oh, there's way down there, and you go like this, and time you got through, you were sucked way behind, and you're still firing. And of course, one time, a bullet went through the windshield of the guy that was flying the toad. He said, "Oh, knock it off, fellas." He said, "See, when you get sucked behind, you're shooting at the sock and also shooting at the plane ahead." So anyhow, that's where we learned aerial gunnery.
So where were you first deployed when you saw action?
Okay, so anyhow, I got to tell you one other story. So. We thought when we were going to war, we were going to have to fly the F-4F, the same that Joe Foss flew. And that dumb plane, you had to crank up the wheels. So what would happen is when you take off, you give it throttle in your left hand, and then you had the stick in the right hand. Then you changed hands and put the stick in your left hand so you could reach down and crank up the wheels. Then you looked up, you're going straight in. that dumb plane, I tell you, that
Not a
was
good
dangerous.
design.
And so we thought we were going to war in that thing, and so they shifted us to San Francisco to get ready to go. And with San Francisco, they come out with a new plane called the Corsair. It's a gull-wing plane. Said, you can take it up and get acquainted with it. So we got up and we dogfight the Army up there and have fun with it. And one day, my buddy and I said, oh, there's a big football game down there. Let's buzz them. So he and I got down on the ground, and we got right up, and then we hopped up over the edge of the stadium and went right down on the field and did slow rolls up over it. Found out later it was the Rose Bowl. So we didn't care, and we thought, they're not going to do anything to us anyhow. So,
Did you catch any grief for it, or did anybody report you, or what were you doing?
No. I mean, here you're a young, spirited young man, 43, and we found out there was a girls' school over near there, in an old college place, and the girls, they bathed, sunbathed in the roof. So we went out and buzzed that place. We never did see anything, but so
you tried.
So we tried.
So now, as a pilot, were you in the Air Force as well, or were you not in the Air Force?
No. Strictly Marine Corps, which is a part of the Navy.
Yeah.
And so then we got, in order to get us pilots over to into combat, they put us in an old tanker, an old oil tanker. And we had maybe 60 pilots on this old tanker, and it rolled side to side and pitched up and down in tough seas. And so we got down toward the equator, we couldn't go below to sleep, and it was stifling hot down there. They hadn't invented air conditioning, and so we'd sleep on the deck, but we'd tie ourselves. We'd put a rope around our wrists and tie it to something stable on the, so in case it rolled, you wouldn't fall off, because if you fall off in the middle of the night, goodbye.
Yeah.
So that old slow boat took 28 days to get down into Ifadi Islands, which is just off the coast of Australia. Which then they had planes for us there, and we'd take our plane and I remember we'd baby that plane. We'd go up, we'd fly around, and we'd baby that plane. I would take the propellers and take sandpaper and sand the front of that, make sure it goes through the air a little faster. We did everything we can to slim that thing to air. I remember, and of course, the Marine Corps didn't eat like the Navy. The Navy had the good food. We had was kind of cornmeal mush and syrup. Cornmeal mush 3 times a day. And one time, we found out the farmer on this island had some cattle way up the hills. And so guess what? Some of the boys went up and shot the steer, and we had barbecued beef on the spit on the fireplace down on the beach,
Nice. So that would have been the summer of '43. When did you go from California to the islands there? Summer of '43.
Summer of '44.
Summer of '44. Okay.
Summer of 1944, and I had two buddies with me down there. We called everybody by their last name, Baker and Hubbs from Georgia. Okay, and they're like, if you ever looked at the show MASH, it's like Hawkeye and Pierce. They were best of buddies. I mean, they'd get a bottle of whiskey and get a fireplace going down on the beach and sit there and sing all the old songs, and until they fell over. But anyhow, I remember when we got aboard the carrier, these two characters, one day we're going through, they monked together. They were buddies. They were going through line, and they had chocolate pudding. Hubbs took a big scoop of chocolate pudding, turned around to Baker, and put it in his shirt pocket. Put that chocolate pudding in. Baker didn't say anything. He just unbuttoned it. He said, "It's your shirt, Hubs," and handed it back to him.
So what carrier did you serve on then?
I was on the Wasp. I was on the carrier Wasp. And so war is, I don't know how to describe it. You're all in combat, and then you're nothing. Then you're in combat, and then you're nothing. I mean, you probably go a week and not do a darn thing.
So you're either bored or anything but bored.
Yeah. When they send you up, you're looking for them. Yeah. I remember one time I led a squadron of 8, and we were going out looking for Japanese, And all of a sudden I said, "Tally ho," which means there's the enemy. Tally ho, 11 o'clock, and then I peeled at 11 and kept going. Nobody could see it. I found out later it was an oil spot on my windshield.
Oh.
So the other people were looking for what you were seeing, and they couldn't see it because it was a mark on your windshield that you identified.
So you had mentioned some characters that you had a chance to serve with, and they kind of reminded you of some of the guys from MASH. When you watch TV programs like MASH, and you watch movies that have to do with the service, is that even close to what it was like, or is that completely different?
Oh, no, it was close. I mean, we all lived in tents together, and it was hot. And so the tents were rolled up, and it's pitch at night. There's no street lights. It's pitch black. It's pitch black. And we all slept with a loaded pistol under a pillow because the Japanese, they were starving. We'd taken over the island. They were starving, and they'd sneak in to steal food. And I remember we were on Guam. We'd landed on Guam. When I landed on Guam, the Seabees ahead of us had made us runway so we could land. And the front was about half a mile ahead of us. They were still shooting up there. And so, like I say, at night, we slept with a pistol because they were still looking for food. I remember one night I had to go to the bathroom. So, and nobody had flashlights and nobody had cameras. That was against the regulation. So I had to go outside of the tent, and I heard people throwing a bullet in their chambers inside. And I said, "Whoops, guys! Hey, it's me! I'm just out here." So I had to make sure of that too. Well, anyhow, when we landed on Guam, that's the first time I saw dead bodies laying around everywhere. They don't have time to bury them or pick them up. We were there probably 4 or 5 days right after they had get killed. So then the real combat came when I got aboard carrier, and so out of Guam, we'd fly up Mariana Islands. See, there were 2 front prongs that went up from Australia where the staging was. One prong went up through, the one I was with, went up through Mariana up to Guam and Okinawa and in that way, and Iwo Jima. The other prong went up through Philippines. We're gradually getting toward Tokyo. And so after we landed and I got some tents, we'd fly up to Saipan, and we'd strafe the Saipan. You see, I would be in this battles probably 6 months before they invaded it. We were softening the positions, getting rid of all the machine guns and anything else we can, so when the Marines landed, there wouldn't be so much opposition. Mm-hmm. And so, anyhow, the shores of Saipan was cliffs. So there was no beach, there was cliffs. There's a little beach down below, but the cliffs, and there were caves in there, and these caves had machine guns, and they were firing at us, and we were firing at them. And so we'd concentrate and fire at those machine gun pits until the last second we had to pull up because there was a cliff there. We'd be right on we call it right on the deck, right on the water. We were right, then we'd have to pull up. So that's the first firing I got into. Then from there, I was carrier based. We went on to Iwo Jima, And let me tell you why we did this. See, from Saipan, they figured the bombers it was close enough, the bombers could fly into Tokyo and bomb Tokyo and bomb their airfields and have enough fuel to get back home. Well, halfway between Saipan and Tokyo were these little bunch of islands called Chichijima and Iwo Jima. They would radio ahead and tell the ones that were coming home. Iwo Jima, the troops had already landed there, and they were trying to take Iwo Jima. And right next door, 30 miles away, was Chichijima. And the very Chichijima had a radio station, and President Bush was in trying to bomb that radio station, and he got hit and had to bail out the very same time, the very same hour, the very same minute that I was over at Iwo Jima, over here. And he got hit and bailed out, and his goal was to bomb the radio transmitter out so they couldn't. See, we had to take these two transmitters out, these two islands, so the bombers could get to Tokyo, and they wouldn't know they were coming.
Gotcha.
Japanese, that's why it was. And so he didn't have a fighter plane. He had the SB-2C, the Douglas Dauntless, in which he had two more crew right in line with each other. One was a navigator, and the one behind him is a machine gun. He faced the machine gun, faced in the rear in case someone tried to attack him. So, and he bailed out, and he told his crew to bail out, and he never heard again. So they probably never got out of the plane.
Mm-hmm. And then there's a book called Flyboys, which that's documented how he was rescued by a submarine, and just the chance encounter, because the ocean is obviously huge.
And anyhow, he parachuted out. And so the Japanese saw this parachute.
Right.
They got in there, whatever kind of boat they had, the machine guns, and they were racing out to get this pilot. In the meantime, the submarine surfaced, and he got aboard the submarine, got rescued before they got there.
Yeah. At his funeral here, George Bush Sr., they showed some photography and some video of that. Just the timing of it all. It's amazing how he survived that crash.
It sure is. I know that when we had radio silence. I mean, we could talk to each other. Us pilots could talk to each other, but the big ship, they would never radio back because the submarine would zero in there and tell them where they were, and so they'd never come back. So anyhow, we got a chance to hit Tokyo. It'd be a big morale builder back home to let them know that we could reach Japan. Japan thought they were untouchable. The reason Japan did all this, you must remember, Japan is an island, and they were doubling their population every 20 years, another generation. They had to go somewhere, and so the way they thought, we'll go out to these islands. Now they'd go out and conquer an island because there's just civilians there, and they'd get all of them together and they'd kill them all. They'd kill all the natives in every island they got to, and bury them in a big pit, and then so they colonized. That was their goal, and of course they made the mistake of arousing the giant of the United States of America. They thought if they destroyed the fleet, then no one's going to stop them. And
that backfired a bit.
That kind of backfired. Everybody got red, white, and blue,
So let's talk about the day that the war finally ended, and you were notified that everything was done. Where were you at that time?
I was home on leave. We'll get to that in a minute. Let's go back and finish the combat, okay?
Yeah.
What happened is they decided us pilots are going to go to Tokyo. We're going to be and there was 8 of us. 8 of us fighters went in low on the water to avoid their radar, and then we climb up over the hills, and we come down strafing the Japanese plane. They were taking off against us. We would go. 8 of us went in, 5 of us came out. After we hit the Tokyo airfield, my leader, George Dooley, he got right down on the water. He got right on the water and followed the river on out to the ocean, and the machine gunners couldn't point down. They were gauged to point up. And so we get down below. I'd go by them, and I could see their eyeballs. They tried to point down, but the machine guns would not go down below, so they couldn't shoot at us. And all of a sudden, we were out, and then it was so primitive back in those days. You know, we could radio ahead, but the carrier would never talk back because the enemy submarines would spot them and go after them. So anyhow, they told us where they're going to be at a certain latitude and so on. So we pull out kind of a little chalkboard and a piece of paper, and we draw in there. It says, we're going 250 knots. That's about the same as miles per hour, you know. Mm-hmm. Anyhow, we're going out at this certain angle because this is where the submarine said they're going to be.
Where the carrier said they'd be.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so I mean the carrier is going to be, okay? So we gets out there, and the submarine, and the carrier is going to be 22 knots this way, and so it's going to be out here. We gets out there to this point of rendezvous. All you could see was ocean. No carrier. Radio silence. Well, what they'd given us before we left, the code for the day, they gave us a piece of paper. It's like cutting a piece of pie into 16 parts. And each little part, one would be, say, A, one would be C, one would be S, one would be J. And they had letters. And we all knew Morse code. So we listened to the carrier would broadcast this out, different sections. So we listened to it. Oh, that's an M. And so, yeah, just keep going, M. Oh, it turned to an S. That means we've gone too far, so we turned back to M. And then we went into R. Oh, that went too far. And went back and forth like this until about 30 minutes later, there's that little dot way out there in the ocean. There it is. Running out of gas, of course. Oh, by the way, before we went in on this run, we were supposed to get into within 100 miles of Tokyo. But a fishing trawler saw us. We said, they're going to know it. So we took off 200 miles away instead of 100 miles away. And we got back, the gauge was below empty. We were on vapor. We're flying on vapor. And we saw that, and we figured, boy, we're trying to get in. And we knew you better make that landing perfect, because if they give you a go-around, you wouldn't make it. You wouldn't have enough to go around. So anyhow, we saw it down there, and we come in. There were, like I say, 8 of us went in, and 5 of us coming back. Out of those 3, I saw one of them go in, but I don't know what happened to the other 2. We saw that carrier, and we got it just right, and we come in. See, when to land on the carrier, you come alongside of it. You're going probably 250 knots. You slow it down to 99 knots here. As you come around the downside, you're holding that plane at almost a stalling speed. You're holding it at 76 knots. 76 knots. You're holding it on the propeller. It stalls at 69 knots. So you had to slow that down to land. And if you got too slow, you're dead. So anyhow, you come in and you land. And when you land aboard the carrier, you let the signal officer fly in. He says, give it a little more gas, or tilt it, or you're too high, or you're too low. You learn to follow him in. And just as you get over the edge, and of course the carrier is going up and down too.
Moving target.
Yeah, and so you got to get it just right. And if you get it right over the edge, he goes cut, and you pull back of the throttle, and you flop in. You're in there, and that hook is supposed to grab a cable across the way. There's about 9 cables, and the hook is supposed to grab one. If it bounces, the miss is supposed to grab another one. If it bounces again, they throw up a steel barrier, hydraulic, right now, and you crash into it. You get out, and they push the plane overside. They don't have time to fix them.
If you don't come in just right, what was that?
Yeah, they give you a wave off, which means you got to get out of there. If you give it the power too fast, the torque will flip you upside down and kill you. So you got to ease into it, and then go around again and make another pass. But I remember I saw one guy from Minneapolis. His name was Burnham, and he gave him a wave off. He gave a lot of gas. He went upside down, and I saw him crash. He went down. He went down, and about 2 minutes later, he popped up. Everybody wears a life vest. We call them the Mae West. They pull this, and he popped up. He's all bleeding and everything else, and he ended up. All he had was a big cut in his forehead, And from then on, his name was Notchhead Burnham.
So they plucked him out and they saved him?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so later on, I found out he was an insurance man in Minneapolis, and I talked to his son.
Nice.
I talked to his son. Another interesting thing is a guy by the name of Flynn. You see, when you get down toward the ocean, you're supposed to turn so there's no slipstream for the guy behind you.
To take off.
Okay.
Because every 20 seconds there's double catapults. Every 20 seconds. In order to get a squadron in the air, it takes 20 minutes, to get that many people up there. But anyhow, this one guy, one day I wasn't flying. I was in the crow's nest watching everybody take off. This one guy, you see, you're loaded with a bomb and you're loaded with machine guns. It's pretty heavy. And when you get down there, you don't want to turn because it's close to the ocean, see? But you got to. So you turn. One guy, he go down, he got so close, he never turned. He went straight ahead. The guy behind him flipped him and killed him. 50 years later, my commander, Dooley, said, I don't remember a Flynn that got killed. I said, I remember very well. He said, you remember it? Yeah. He said, his 3 sons are trying to locate what happened to him. He was such a good pilot. He was a Canadian pilot. It seems to me the Navy rejected him. So he got trained in Canada, and then the Marines took him. And so they knew he was a good, careful pilot. All he knew is their dad died. They never knew what happened. I said, I remember specifically. This is 50 years later.
Wow. And
all of a sudden, I had one brother on from New York and one from Texas and one from California. They're all on the phone, wanted to know what happened, and I was able to tell them.
Amazing. How did they find you?
They knew what squadron they was.
Okay.
And so they were trying to they got a hold of the commanding officer.
Okay.
And then, so the commanding officer called me to see if I knew anything about it. I said, yeah. And so then they told him.
And this happened in the the 90s? These...
Yeah, it's 50 years later.
Wow.
Sure. Yeah.
So something I had asked about earlier, and you said we'd come back to it. I want to... The day that you found out the war was done, you said you were on leave at the time. What was the feeling like to get that call, to find that out?
I had coaxed this gal when I got back to Sioux Falls. And I'm going on leave. It's either now or ever, never. So we got married at Daytona Beach at the Methodist Church, July 14th, 1945. And then I got stationed, I think, Daytona Beach or something, right? Near Melbourne, Florida or something right in there. So I was stationed there, and I was going to have to go back. They said, we're going to give you orders to go back in about, And so, anyhow, I got married. And a month later, I was still there with my new bride, and the war was over. A month after I got married. And for 67 years, she said, if I'd known the war was going to be over when we got married, I'd never married you.
Sense of humor, I'm sure. That's awesome.
It must have worked all right.
That's great.
Well, thank you again for your service to our country, first of all.
Yeah.
And thank you also for taking the time to visit with us.
Yeah.
It's been absolutely wonderful, and I wish we had another hour to talk to you, because I bet you've got another hour, at least an hour worth of stories.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the one thing I'll make a point is, when Claude visited us today, he's wearing his same jacket that he wore in World War II. And what do you say now? You're 5 pounds heavier? Other than that, you're pretty much the same?
Let's see. I've gained 5 or 6 pounds in 75 years, yeah.
But it still fits.
My shoulders have slipped.
I think I've gained that much in the last month, so you're doing pretty darn good. Well, Claude, thank you again for being here, sir. And again, Garrett, thank you for joining us here as well. This is Our People, Our Story, Claude Hone. Again, if you have not had a chance to hear the other version of the program with Claude, where we talk more about his real estate career in Sioux Falls and kind of the history of Sioux Falls, I encourage you to listen to that version as well. Our People, Our Story is a Sioux Falls Connected podcast. I'm John Small from Sunny Radio.